Hey out there, legal warriors. Does a judge have to follow agreed sentencing recommendations on criminal cases? Now, I put out videos for Washington State, but this could also apply all throughout the United States. If you're interested in this area of the law, stay tuned. This is the video for you. My name is Attorney Lance Fryrear. I'm a defense attorney in Linwood, Washington. My law firm's been defending people charged with crimes all throughout Washington State for more than 20 years, and I'm putting out these videos to help educate the public. So if you find this useful, please like and please subscribe. More people get the help they need. Now I'm just going to jump right into it. First things first, we have to talk about what an agreed sentencing recommendation even is. And for most cases in Washington State that are criminal matters, they're going to be resolved by some type of agreement between the prosecutor and the defense. Now, hopefully that agreement does not involve pleading guilty to something. Oftentimes it doesn't. Oftentimes there's dismissals. There's alternative ways to get cases dismissed. And if you watch my channel, I cover all different types of ways that can happen. But let's say we have a situation where the resolution is by some type of plea of guilty to something. If that's the case, then the prosecutor makes a sentencing recommendation. What is the government going to recommend if the plea is accepted? And the defense makes a sentencing recommendation. What are they going to recommend for the sentence if the plea goes through and is accepted? And so oftentimes I get asked the question, hey, is the judge going to follow the agreed sentencing recommendation? And for this video, we want to know, does the judge have to follow the agreed recommendation? So the answer to, is the judge likely to follow the agreed recommendation? The answer is yes, the judge is likely, and we're going to cover those reasons here in a minute. But the answer to the question, does the judge have to follow the agreed recommendation? In almost all cases, that answer is no. They do not have to follow the agreed recommendation. And if you ever go through a plea form in Washington State, one of the warnings says that the defendant has to be aware that the judge can give any sentence up to the maximum sentence allowed by law, despite what either the prosecutor recommends or the defense recommends. They can also go below the agreed recommendation. So buyer beware that you need to talk to your attorney about what the chances are of the judge following an agreed sentencing recommendation if there is one. Now, sometimes there's not an agreed recommendation. The prosecutor recommends one thing and the defense recommends another. That happens more often in felonies from what I see, where there's large sentences, and therefore people are fighting more about how many months or years someone might be having in prison. Most misdemeanors don't carry a jail recommendation if you don't have a bad record or it's not a mandatory jail case like a DUI. So for the most part, we're talking agreed recommendations for non-felonies. Now, you heard me say earlier that yes, the judge will usually follow an agreed recommendation, and there's a reason why I think that happens. What are the reasons why a judge usually follows the recommendation? Well, number one, the judge usually gives respect and deference to the parties. If the judges remain neutral, they don't know anything about the case, except possibly what's in the probable cause statement if there was an arrest, a short version of the facts that let the judge find a probable cause. And this case may go on for months, even a year or more. And if the prosecutor who represents the government is saying, this is what the government wants for punishment, the defense is saying, yes, we agree, most judges would say, hey, I'm going to respect those parties' wishes because they know better, right? The government's asking for something, the defense is agreeing. Who am I to get in the way and recommend and impose actually something different than what the parties worked so hard over so long, who know way more about the case than I do as judge? I'm usually going to follow that recommendation. That's the reason. One is respect and deference to the parties. Reason number two is, and I think this one is important, if a judge has a reputation of not following agreed recommendations, there's no longer going to be any pleas in that courthouse. And the reason is, if the defense is constantly getting hammered with a higher recommendation than what the prosecutor recommends, and their clients are suffering because of that, why would anyone then ever enter a plea in front of that judge again? They just wouldn't. They'd either affidavit the judge and remove the judge from the case at the beginning, and that judge would be looking for work at some point or be working a different type of case, most likely if it got extreme. Sometimes I've seen public defenders do that. I've seen prosecutors do it too. where they just routinely affidavit a judge because they don't like what the judge does in court, and that's called affidavit of prejudice. On top of that, if there are no more pleas in the court because the judge is going above sentencing recommendations, then the court can only take so many cases to trial. There's only so many spots on a particular courthouse's calendar to have jury trials, because there's hundreds, if not thousands, of cases, and only a handful of these cases go to trial in a year in most misdemeanor courtrooms. So there's a lot of reasons why the judge should likely follow an agreed sentencing recommendations out of respect to the parties and really just self-preservation. It just makes sense because that's a little bit how the system works, everybody working together. Now, what are some reasons why a judge might not follow an agreed recommendation? Well, it could be an issue that's particularly important to the judge, right? That maybe they really don't like vehicle prowling cases. I certainly didn't when I was a prosecutor. Or maybe they see the offender's record more seriously than the prosecutor did. Maybe they don't like what the prosecutor did, and therefore they're going to go above what the prosecutor recommended. But I think the main reason a judge may go above a sentencing recommendation and make it worse is they get moved emotionally by victims that appear in court. And this doesn't happen often in misdemeanor land, but it does happen quite often in felony land, because in felony land, the cases are much more serious. Sexual offenses, offenses with weapons, offenses where people die. Those cases are much more likely to have heightened emotions naturally of the victims and the victims' families. Even in misdemeanor land, though, that could happen where there are victims that show up and they move the judge, and then the judge makes a decision to impose a worse sentence than even the government is recommending. And when that happens, I find that's usually the reason why. Obviously, as a defense attorney, I wouldn't agree with it. As a prosecutor, I wouldn't agree with it, because when a judge does that, they're removing the power of the parties to safely resolve a case after a lot of hard work. Now, this is the judge's right. The judge does nothing wrong by imposing whatever sentence they might want to impose, because they're allowed to. But there are reasons why most judges will follow agreed recommendations. So how do we break it down? Does the judge have to follow a recommendation? No. Does the judge almost always follow an agreed recommendation? Yes. And the cases where they don't follow a recommendation hopefully can be predicted to some degree by your attorney, although they can't always be predicted. For the most part, we tell our clients that if we've done everything right, we would expect the judge to follow the recommendation. But once in a while, we can get surprised. And when those things happen, believe me, we remember who that judge was. So I hope you find this useful. If so, please like and please subscribe. More people will get to see it. And more importantly, if you have a legal problem out there in Washington State, feel free to give my office a call. We've been doing this for more than 20 years. If we get on board, we'll listen to what happened, we'll identify a way forward, and we'll be there for you. Thank you.